My family treated me like trash for years. When I distanced myself, they discovered I was the only one keeping them afloat. I never really liked Christmas. There's something about being pushed into a house full of people who pretend to care about you only once a year that makes me uncomfortable. Maybe it's the forced smiles, or the way everyone suddenly becomes interested in your life just to compare it with theirs. For me, it was always a reminder of where I stand in the family hierarchy, somewhere between the forgotten cousin and that distant relative whose name no one quite remembers. But this year was different. This year I decided I wasn't going to swallow disrespect anymore. My name is Marina. I'm 32 years old. I work as a software engineer, nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills very well. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sao Paulo, debt-free, not depending on anyone. I built my life brick by brick, line of code by line of code. But in my family, that never seemed enough. Because I'm not married. Because I don't have children. Because I don't post photos of international trips every month or drive an imported car. For them, success is appearance, it's status, it's having something to show off on social media. I grew up being the strange child. While my cousins played with dolls and talked about makeup, I was in my room taking apart my father's old computer to understand how it worked. I wasn't lonely, just different. I never fit the mold they expected of me. My parents divorced when I was 15. After that, I became even more invisible. My mother rebuilt her life quickly, remarried, had another child. My father dove into work and barely had time for me. I basically raised myself. Family gatherings were always a minefield. But I kept going year after year, with that pathetic hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time someone would ask how I really was, not just to have something to comment about behind my back. The person who always made all this painfully clear is my cousin Larissa. She's 35 years old, arrogant, and never had to lift a finger in her life. Her father, my uncle Ricardo, owns a chain of car dealerships. Larissa works in the company's marketing, which basically means she posts photos at corporate parties on Instagram and somehow gets paid for it. She lives in a penthouse her parents bought, drives a Mercedes she can barely park, and posts daily about her self-care routine and success. Larissa always had a special talent for diminishing people with a smile on her face, the type of person who compliments your outfit just to later comment that it doesn't fit you well. This year, I decided to do something different. I decided to bring my girlfriend, Julia. We've been together for almost 2 years, and she's the kind of person who makes me feel at home just by being beside her. Julia is a psychologist, works with children in vulnerable situations. She has this comforting calm that soothes even my most anxious thoughts. I warned Julia about my family. I gave her a summary of who was who to avoid, what not to talk about. She just smiled, held my hand and said, "Sounds fun. Let's create some memories." The moment we entered my Aunt Claudia's house, I felt the energy shift. You know, when people look at you for too long, as if they're looking for flaws they can politely comment on later? That's how my aunt looked at Julia. "Oh, how lovely. Marina is finally dating," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Julia just laughed, but I felt my face heat up. Subtle as always. Not enough to cause a scene, just enough to remind me of my place. Dinner was served around 8. The table was enormous, decorated with a Christmas exaggeration worthy of a decorating magazine. Candles, golden china, cards with names written in perfect calligraphy. They placed me at the farthest end of the table, between my Uncle Paolo, who still thinks the internet is the devil's work, and the family friend that nobody likes much but keeps inviting for unknown reasons. Julia was beside me, fortunately, discreetly squeezing my hand when she saw me examining the room with that old familiar dread. Dinner started well. Normal conversations, clinking of glasses, dishes being passed. Then came the toasts. Uncle Ricardo stood up first, talking about gratitude for family and strong traditions. Aunt Claudia continued with something about valuing elders and welcoming newcomers. Then Larissa stood up. I could already feel the thing forming. When she raised her champagne glass, it seemed like she was going to give a viral motivational speech. I just wanted to say, she began all sweet and with false humility, that I'm very proud of everyone at this table. We all did so well this year. Promotions, new houses, weddings. You know, real-life achievements. There was scattered laughter and polite nods. I felt a strange pang in my chest, but tried to ignore it. Then she looked directly at me, her eyes shining as if she had rehearsed this in the mirror. Well, everyone except Marina, obviously. She laughed, taking a sip from her glass. But hey, maybe next year, right? The table exploded in laughter. Even Uncle Ricardo laughed. I was paralyzed, not knowing whether to laugh along or crawl under the table. My stomach sank like a stone. Julia didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. Her gaze passed over the table serene, but with sharp focus. Then, as soon as the laughter started to diminish, she stood up. She smoothed her dress, raised her glass, and said with the most polite and serene voice I'd ever heard, "Funny because she's the reason your father's company didn't go bankrupt last year." Silence. Deadly silence. The kind of silence where even the champagne stops being served. Larissa blinked, her smile disappearing from her lips as if someone had unplugged the socket. Uncle Ricardo's fork clinked against his plate. Aunt Claudia's mouth was slightly open, as if she was going to speak but forgot how. I felt a tightness in my chest, feeling my heart beating hard. I had no idea what Julia was talking about. I never mentioned anything like that to her. But I could see in her face that she wasn't bluffing. It was at that moment that everything started to fall apart. And it was just the beginning. For 3 full seconds, no one said a word. It was as if the entire house had paused. The laughter disappeared from the room, and in its place was that low, trembling discomfort. In the silence, everyone shifted and exchanged looks, not knowing whether they should pretend it was a joke or act as if they hadn't heard. Julia sat down again, calm as always, wiping the corner of her mouth with her napkin, as if she had just commented about the weather. Uncle Ricardo laughed first. One of those performative sounds that usually means someone is about to change the subject without acknowledging the elephant sitting at the table. "Well," he said, laughing nervously, "that was something." Then he picked up the serving spoon and grabbed the mashed potatoes, as if the whole moment hadn't happened. A few others murmured in agreement, returning to their food in the same bland way. But Larissa wasn't finished. Her smile had disappeared, but that presumptuous energy hadn't. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, tilting her head toward Julia as if trying to trap her in a game of chicken. "What exactly did you mean by, 'she's the reason my father's company didn't go bankrupt'?" Julia turned to her slowly. "Oh, Marina never told you?" I looked at her confused. I really didn't know what she was about to say. She turned to Larissa, her voice pleasant but cutting. 6 months ago, Marina's company was hired to do a security audit on the dealership systems. There were serious problems with customer data leakage and critical vulnerabilities that could result in million-dollar lawsuits. My stomach churned. She wasn't wrong. I hadn't told her, but she must have found out. I don't talk much about work. I regularly sign confidentiality agreements. But the week she was referring to. Yes, I remembered now. I was called into a last-minute review team to help track vulnerabilities in the system. I didn't know the names of the people involved at the time, just client codes and data trails. Julia continued, still calm. The only reason the company wasn't sued and went broke was because Marina identified and corrected the problems before sensitive data from thousands of customers was leaked. She didn't even take credit for it. Just did her job. The room paled. Uncle Ricardo looked at me, then at Julia, then back at his plate as if it were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Larissa, for her part, looked like someone had slapped her with her own credit score. I felt a strange emotion. Not shame, just seen. As if for the first time in a long time someone had placed me in the center of the room and said, "She's important." But if you think that was the breaking point, it wasn't. It was just a spark. The real damage came after dessert. You see, families like mine don't confront. They keep tensions muffled. They make silent judgments and whisper behind backs. So after Julia dropped that silent bomb, the rest of the night continued as if nothing had happened on the surface. But under the table, I could feel the cold shoulders, the furious looks, the way Aunt Claudia started refilling everyone's drinks except ours, the way Larissa suddenly forgot to pass us the pie. It was as if we had pressed an invisible switch and become radioactive. When we finally left, around 11 at night, I felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. I was proud of Julia. My God, so proud. But I also knew my family. They don't forget offenses. Especially when you embarrass the golden child. The messages started the next day. Aunt Claudia, that was incredibly inappropriate, Marina. You embarrassed Larissa in front of the whole family. Christmas is about gratitude, not about grudges. Uncle Ricardo, we need to talk about what Julia said. That information was confidential. I could report her for violation. Larissa, I hope you and your little on-call girlfriend are happy. You ruin the vibe for everyone. Next time, maybe it's better if you stay home. I ignored the first ones, but the last one got me. The way she said, little on-call girlfriend, as if I were a stain they tolerated until I had the audacity to speak. That night, I sat on the couch with Julia and said, I think I'm tired of pretending for them. She didn't ask what I meant. Just said, great. But distancing yourself from your family isn't as clean as it seems. And she was right. Because life, unfortunately, continues to give reasons for them to drag me back. 3 weeks later, I got a call from my mother. We talk every 2 or 3 months, more now than we used to. We're not especially close. Still, when she called out of the blue, I answered. Hi, dear. Did you hear about Larissa? No, I said, frowning. She sighed. Mass resignations. The entire marketing department left. She's devastated. Claudia is blaming everyone, saying Larissa was sabotaged. I said nothing. I wasn't going to pretend sympathy. She's living with Ricardo and Claudia now, my mother added. Apparently lost the apartment. Right. The apartment. The one her parents paid for. Still, I felt a bit of empathy. As horrible as Larissa had always been to me, I wouldn't wish for anyone to lose their job. But that empathy didn't last long, because 2 days later I received another message. Larissa, I know we've had our differences, but I need a favor. Can we talk? Against my common sense, I agreed. We met at a cafe near her house. She looked different. Tired. Smudged makeup, hair tied in a bun instead of the always styled curls. For a moment, I almost forgot how cruel she had been, until she opened her mouth. I need a referral. I blinked. For what? A job. Anything. Something tech-related. I thought maybe you could put in a word at your company. Drop my name there. I looked at her. You called me a failure 3 weeks ago. That was a joke, she said quickly. You know how Christmas is. People say things. You embarrassed me too. Remember? Can't we just let this go? I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the presumptuous Instagram-filtered Larissa I grew up hating. I saw the person underneath. Arrogant, yes, but also desperate. She wasn't there to apologize. She was there because she thought I was still an easy person to manipulate. Still the cousin who stayed quiet while they humiliated me, and who later picked up the pieces when they needed something. I didn't say no. Not at that moment. I said I would think about it. But it was at that moment that something broke. Because that night, while I was sitting scrolling through old messages from the family group, something I usually avoid, I found it. A screenshot buried in a conversation from months ago. Larissa had sent it to the family group without realizing I was still included. It was a photo of a dating profile. Mine. Julia and I had just started seeing each other at that time. And I still had an old account circulating that I had forgotten to delete. Larissa had captioned it, I guess some people never update. Just like her hobbies. Face with hand over mouth. Aunt Claudia responded with a laughing emoji. Uncle Ricardo. Just like her taste for everything. My mother had liked the message. And there it was, clear as day. They hadn't just disrespected me at dinner. They had been mocking me for years. Behind my back. With the people I should trust. Even when I was taking care of my life. Even when I was succeeding. Silently. They were destroying me as if it were a team sport. That's when the betrayal finally felt real. Not just Christmas. Not just the silence when I needed support. But the ongoing intentional sabotage. The way they never took me seriously. Not even as a human being. Just as the weird cousin. The one they could laugh at without consequences. I sat there in the dark. Breathing heavily. Heart pounding. I wasn't angry anymore. I was fed up. And that's when the plan started to take shape. Because the one thing my family never understood was that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It means observing. It means waiting. And I've been doing both for a very, very long time. Rock bottom doesn't always arrive suddenly, like in a movie scene. It's a certainty that settles in you without making noise, like fog entering through the door, freezing everything before you realize what changed. That's how I felt in the weeks after that Christmas. No big breakdown. No violent confrontation. Just this emptiness. Slow and growing. It was the first time in years that I completely stopped responding to the family chat. I didn't mute it. I wanted to see everything. Understand how little I had mattered to them over the years. For a while, I started thinking that maybe I had imagined how bad everything was. That maybe I had exaggerated the favoritism, the mockery, the indirect compliments. But that screenshot that Larissa sent of my dating profile was the nail in the coffin. They weren't just indifferent. They were cruel. And they did it together, as if it were a sport. I didn't tell Julia about the group chat immediately. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't even know how to say it without seeming bitter or hurt. And I didn't want her to see me like that. I had always been the calm girl. The girl who doesn't lose her temper, who doesn't make drama. But that silence I had carried for years was finally getting heavy. Too heavy. I didn't go to New Year's Eve. That was the first time. Aunt Claudia sent a message the day before, asking if I would bring Julia to the annual celebration. No apologies. No warmth. Just the expectation that I would show up, smile, and pretend that Larissa hadn't tried to humiliate me in front of the whole family. I left it on read. Then I turned off my phone and took Julia to the beach for the weekend. That trip changed something in me. There was a moment, just one moment, calm and simple, where Julia and I were sitting on a rock looking at the sea, drinking coconut water straight from the coconut and watching the waves hit the sand. She leaned toward me and said, "You're not who they say you are, you know?" I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "They treat you as if you were forgettable. As if you were the only one who didn't succeed. But the truth is they just don't understand you. And people destroy what they don't understand." I didn't respond right away. Just let the words sit there. Landed. And then something clicked in me. She was right. I spent years letting other people's narratives define me. The quiet cousin, the tech weirdo, the one who didn't marry young, didn't post family photos, didn't believe in the game everyone was playing. But the truth is I had succeeded. I just did it alone. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I wasn't loud, but I was respected in my field. I didn't seek validation, but I had something better, freedom. And somehow, in all the noise of trying to belong, I had forgotten that. When we returned from the trip, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my father. We were never very close after the divorce. He barely called, barely showed up. But this time I was the one who reached out. We talked for an hour about everything. About how I felt invisible while growing up. About how I always wondered if I was the problem, or if the family was simply broken. He was silent for a while after I said that. Then he spoke. "You were never the problem, Marina. You were too different for them to understand." And that scared them. That conversation healed something I didn't even know was still open. In the following weeks, I dove into work. Not as escape, but as construction. I started presenting new infrastructure ideas to company leadership, redesigning parts of our backend that had been held together with duct tape for years. My boss noticed. I was invited to meetings I'd never participated in before. In March, they offered me a leadership position. My first real leadership role. I accepted. I didn't post about it. Didn't email the family. Didn't say a word. And that silence was good. Not out of malice, but for peace. That same month, Julia and I moved into a small house with 2 balconies where we had breakfast watching the sunrise. She brought work notes home. I talked about strange bugs I found in legacy code. And somehow we made it work. She was my calm in a world that never gave me space. And slowly, I started reconnecting with people who valued me. An old college classmate, Renata, reached out after I commented on a post about an old programming project we built together. We ended up having lunch. That turned into game nights. Then I met her partner, her friends. People who didn't ask what you achieved this year, but how you really were. That spring, I started a freelance side project. A local NGO needed help building a secure donation platform. It wasn't well-paid work, but it mattered. They couldn't pay much, but insisted on sending me a handwritten card after the work was completed. They said it was the first time their platform didn't crash during a campaign. I framed that card, not out of pride, but to remind myself what real value is. Of course, the family didn't disappear. Aunt Claudia continued sending occasional messages, usually passive-aggressive. "We missed you at Easter." Larissa brought her new boyfriend. He works in finance. Uncle Ricardo called once and left a voicemail saying he was willing to move forward if I wanted. Move forward from what? And Larissa? Well, she ended up getting another job. At some startup trying to establish a brand or something equally vague. I didn't respond when she sent me a LinkedIn request. Didn't respond when she messaged me. I had no resentment. But I also had no interest. Despite the silence, I could feel something changing. Not in them. In me. Because I was no longer avoiding them out of fear. I was choosing myself. Every day. Choosing peace. And choosing people who value me. Not for titles or social media. People who saw me. Not just the absence of someone louder or more attractive. It was around the end of autumn that I heard the rumor. Apparently, Uncle Ricardo was strongly encouraged to retire early. There was a merger with a new tech company. Compliance became a priority. And, well, skeletons don't take long to come out of the closet with new management. The same audit records I reported the previous year. Yes, it seems they opened a bigger can of worms than anyone expected. But it wasn't me who leaked. I hadn't even touched that case since the initial review. Still, it happened. Karma, perhaps. But I didn't celebrate. Didn't tell anyone, not even Julia. Because by that point, I had already started working on something bigger. Something personal. Something mine. It was born from a discrete idea. A mentorship program for young female developers outside the conventional standard. Girls like me. Quiet, forgotten, brilliant. But insecure about their value. I didn't want them to grow up thinking they needed to make noise to be heard. So I built something for them. Slowly, carefully, quietly. And it started to grow. 1, then 4, 10 students. We met virtually on Saturdays. We talked about code, about life, about how to survive in a world that prioritizes volume over value. A 17-year-old girl, Isabella, told me, "You're the first adult who treats me as if I'm not broken." That stayed with me, because I used to need someone like that too. In autumn, I was happier than ever. Not rich, not famous, but fulfilled. And that's when I received an email from Larissa. No subject, just one sentence. "I know what you did." I looked at the screen, my heart racing, because it wasn't about Christmas anymore. It wasn't about a family toast or a ruined dinner. It was about something else. Something deeper. I came to the conclusion that she wasn't talking about the audit. She meant something completely different. Something I hadn't told her yet. I must have read that email a dozen times. "I know what you did." That was it. No greeting, no name, no punctuation. Just 6 words in the subject line and nothing in the body. Like a loaded weapon without instructions. I sat staring, not knowing whether to laugh, delete, or prepare for impact. Months had passed since Larissa tried to get in touch. I figured she had moved on, finding a new way to improve her Instagram. But apparently I underestimated her capacity to hold a grudge. At first, I thought she was bluffing. That email could be about anything. Bitterness about Christmas, maybe. Maybe she realized I ignored all her messages and LinkedIn requests. Or maybe, just maybe, she was playing a bluff, seeing if I would panic, react, reveal something. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized she wasn't bluffing. Because there was something she could be referring to. Something I hadn't told anyone. Not my colleagues, not Julia, not my therapist. And it all started with the file. Months earlier, when I was still involved in the company's back-end overhaul, I came across a duplicate ID buried in an old access log. It wasn't anything special at first. Just 2 user profiles, almost identical, created seconds apart. This kind of thing happens during integrations. Sometimes an intern clicks the wrong button, or HR software has problems during integration. But when I traced the accounts, something didn't add up. One account belonged to a permanent employee, the other to a contractor. Same name, same credentials, different salaries. One listed Larissa's father, Uncle Ricardo, as approval manager. The other had no linked manager. That alone wouldn't be damning. But then I found the invoice trail. The service provider had been receiving payments for almost a year and a half. Not much, just discreetly. Enough to blend in with the noise of corporate expenses. But the worst part was that the service provider had never used the login credentials. Not once. Not to clock in or submit work. It was a ghost. I flagged it discreetly. I submitted a report to internal audit, following protocol. Never mentioned names. Just followed the chain of command and kept my head down. A month later, the project was resolved and I was transferred to a different team. Nobody ever mentioned it again. Until now. Until her. Which meant something. Someone on the inside had told Larissa. And if she knew it was me who initiated the audit that led to her father's early retirement, then she had to assume she also knew about the ghost account. Or at least suspected I knew. More than I made clear. That night, I told Julia everything. We sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket. The city lights shining below us like a sea of secrets. I told her about the log, the ghost account, the invoice trail. How could I have forgotten? How did I leave it there after submitting the report? She listened without interrupting, her hand resting on my knee, her thumb moving back and forth. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "So, what do you want to do now?" I didn't answer immediately, because I wasn't sure. At first, I wanted to ignore it. Pretend it was noise. Let it disappear like any other Larissa rage attack. But this felt different. There was poison in that email. She wasn't just angry. She was threatening something. And if she was willing to dig that deep, she was willing to burn everything down because of an old family shame. So I had to be ready for what she was planning. I decided to dig too. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just to clarify. Because something inside me needed to know the whole truth before deciding what came next. The first thing I did was extract the archive logs from the original project. Most were restricted now, but I still had enough admin clearance to track the metadata. I wasn't trying to start a scandal. I just wanted to know if Ricardo had created the ghost account alone or if someone else had done it for him. That's when I discovered. The IP address used to create the duplicate user wasn't from the office. It was from Larissa's apartment, which meant one of two things. Either Larissa had created the fake account herself, or she had logged in as her father with his credentials and created everything as a side business. And suddenly, everything clicked. The vaguely defined marketing job, the marketing consulting work she always bragged about but never explained, the fact that she always lived above her means, even when the company was supposedly cutting expenses. This wasn't just nepotism. It was fraud. And I discovered it. Twice, without even knowing. I sat there looking at the screen, adrenaline flooding my veins. This was big. Too big. Not just a family scandal. Not just office gossip. If I made this public, it would be the end of her career and her father's. But the question wasn't whether I could. It was whether I should. That night I started planning. Not a lawsuit. Not a press statement. But something more precise. More surgical. Because if I learned anything in the last year, it was that people like Larissa don't learn by being exposed. They learn from consequences. Real consequences they can't turn into victimization. So I made a list. Not of targets, but of patterns. Every time I remembered Larissa exploiting someone's kindness. Borrowed money and forgot to return it. Used contacts to jump interview queues. Took credit for other people's ideas in group projects. Slept around to get favors and then discarded the guy after getting what she needed. All of this wasn't gossip. It wasn't judgment. It was to understand her playbook. Because if I was going to stop her, I had to think like her. In the next 2 weeks, I reached out to some old contacts. People from college, mutual friends, even one of her former bosses who once messaged me years ago saying, "Dude, what's your relationship?" Turns out Larissa had left a trail of confusion wherever she went. One guy told me she used his name as a fake reference, listing him as a team leader, even though he was just an intern at the time. Another said she used a fake offer letter from a competitor to get a raise at her last job. And then there was Olivia, Larissa's old roommate. We met once years ago, when I helped Larissa move into her first apartment. Olivia was sweet, shy, reserved. But when I reached out, she responded almost instantly. I was hoping someone would ask. She told me everything. About how Larissa used her identity to sign up for a credit card and didn't pay the installments. How she forged Olivia's signature on a utility account contract. How she stole her cat. I was shocked. This wasn't immaturity. It was intentional and targeted. And it was all connected by one belief. Larissa thought no one would ever hold her accountable. Because no one ever had. Until now. That's when I made the second list. Of allies. People who were ready to speak. People who had been burned, humiliated, discarded. I didn't have to beg. Most were eager. Some were afraid. Larissa had a special talent for social manipulation. She knew how to turn a room against someone before the person even entered. But some were ready to help. Especially Olivia. Her forged signature appeared in copies of old bills she sent me. Photos of the cat, before and after. A screen recording of Larissa admitting, as a joke, that stealing a cat isn't theft if it likes you better. I organized everything in chronological folders. Clean, emotionless, just facts. And although I still didn't know exactly what I would do with all of it, I knew one thing. If Larissa wanted to play, I would change the rules. Julia knew I was working on something. She didn't ask. Just supported me. Cooked when I forgot to eat. Massaged my shoulders while I was hunched over the laptop with red eyes, sifting through PDFs. You don't have to destroy her, she said one night gently. No, I said. I just want her to finally feel what it's like to be powerless. Because for years, Larissa floated through life with a safety net made of lies, privileges, and a family that never said no. And now that net was unraveling. Her father couldn't protect her anymore. Her mother's social circle was shrinking rapidly, and her reputation was starting to rot. All I needed to do was push. And that opportunity came sooner than I expected. Because a week later, I received an email from a name I hadn't heard in years. Carolina Mendez, a recruiter. She worked at the same tech company where I interned after college. Her email was short, polite, and curious. Hi Marina, I'm not sure if this is still your email, but I have a strange question. We just received a reference check request for a Larissa Costa who claims to have worked with you at TechFlow. She listed you as a supervisor. Just wanted to confirm. Is this correct? I looked at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my face. So that was the game. Larissa was trying to use me as a reference. After everything. After the toast, the messages, the silence, the threats. She still thought I would protect her. She still thought I was the same quiet cousin who said nothing, made no noise. She had no idea who she was dealing with. And suddenly, I knew exactly what to do next. Carolina's email sat in my inbox for hours. Not because I was in doubt about what to respond, but because I wanted to savor that moment. The moment when I would finally have the chance to make Larissa understand that actions have consequences. When I finally typed my response, I kept it short, professional, emotionless. No backstory. Hi Carolina, thank you for reaching out. I can confirm that Larissa Costa never worked for me at TechFlow. In fact, as far as I know, she never worked there in any capacity. Hope this helps. Best regards, Marina. Carefully, I hit send. Then I relaxed and let gravity do the rest. A few days passed. A week later, I heard nothing more from Larissa. No messages, no calls. No vague threats or passive-aggressive phrases. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that buzzed with the quiet before a storm. But I didn't prepare for it. I welcomed it with open arms. 2 weeks later, Olivia messaged me. She's in crisis. I think she lost the job offer. In her stories, she posted about fake people who ruined her life. I think it's about you. I glanced at her page out of curiosity. Larissa's Instagram used to be a curated gallery of leaked vacations, expensive brunches, and inspirational phrases. She definitely didn't live up to it. Now it was chaos. Black background with white text in Comic Sans font. Funny how some people can't stand to see you win. But don't worry, I always bounce back. Flexed bicep sparkles. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so her. She still thought she was the hero of the story. Still thought life was just a montage waiting for her comeback scene. She had no idea that the credits were already rolling. The job she lost wasn't just any job. It was a PR role at a tech company with connections to a major compliance group. They had contacted Carolina for a final check before bringing her on. The job would give Larissa access to internal data, passwords, payment structures. Things no one with a history of manipulation and fraud should be around. That reference check wasn't a formality. It was the only thing between her and another easy paycheck. And I unplugged it. Not out of spite, but out of duty. I warned Olivia. Said I would confirm the truth. Nothing more. She responded with 3 words. She deserved it. The following week, the consequences deepened. I don't know the exact chain of events, but the pieces started emerging in the usual ways. Family gossip. Silence on social media. Sudden and embarrassing absences. It all started when Aunt Claudia emailed me. Something she hadn't done since I skipped New Year's Eve. The subject was simply, "Let's talk." I didn't respond. 2 days later, she called. I ignored. Then came the voicemail. "Marina, we need to clear things up. I think things got out of hand. Larissa is going through a difficult time. She made some mistakes. Nothing serious. Just misunderstandings. I think it would mean a lot if you reached out. For the good of the family. For the good of the family." How lovely. Where was that energy when they laughed at me across the Christmas table? Where was it when I was sitting there, humiliated, while they toasted and celebrated Larissa's latest lie? No. I spent my whole life swallowing my pride to keep the family at peace. I wasn't going to swallow anything anymore. Uncle Ricardo was next. He called during a work meeting. I let it drop to voicemail. The message he left was different. More aggressive. "This wasn't cool, Marina. You think you're some kind of hero? Think what you did makes you better than us? You're still the same weird, lonely girl who couldn't kick a ball. And guess what? Nothing you do will change the fact that you'll always be a footnote in this family." I saved that message because it reminded me of every Christmas action at the children's table, even when I was 25. Every holiday when I brought eager gifts and received nothing but a plastic Tupperware with a pie. Every time I was told, directly or indirectly, that I didn't belong there. That voicemail wasn't an insult. It was validation. And yet, I said nothing. Because by that point, I didn't need to explain myself. The revenge was already working. No fireworks, no scandals. The story Larissa built throughout her life was quietly crumbling. A story in which she was the center of the universe. Untouchable, unstoppable, adored. But when the applause fades, when the lights go out, you discover who she really is. And Larissa? She had nothing left but mirrors. Mirrors that trembled, reflecting a version of herself she no longer even recognized. The rest of the family slowly stretched out. I stopped receiving invitations to birthday parties. The chat group dried up. One day, Aunt Carol messaged me saying she was sorry for my treatment. I liked it, but didn't respond. I wasn't angry. I just didn't care anymore. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Something that changed everything. It was in May. I was at the office, reviewing code with my team, when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. Normally I would ignore it, but something made me answer. "Hello." There was a pause. Heavy breathing. Then a voice I didn't expect to hear. "Marina? It's Larissa." My stomach tightened. Not from fear, but from surprise. It had been months since we had any contact. "What do you want, Larissa?" Another pause. Then, with a voice I had never heard from her before, small, broken, human, she said, "I need to tell you something. About my father. About everything." I was silent. Waiting. And then she started talking. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had discovered the ghost account. Internal audit had continued digging after I left the project. They found not just one fake account, but 5. All created from Larissa's apartment. All receiving payments for services never rendered. But it wasn't Larissa who created them. It was Ricardo. He used her computer, her IP, even her email as backup. All so that, if he was ever caught, he could blame her. His own daughter. He told me it was for taxes, Larissa said, her voice trembling. That it was just creative accounting. That everyone did it. I didn't know, Marina. I swear I didn't know. I wanted not to believe her. I wanted to think it was just another manipulation, another lie from someone who had lied her whole life. But something in her voice was different. It wasn't the confident, presumptuous Larissa I knew. It was someone who had been broken. Completely. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because they're going to sue me, she said. The company. They think it was me. My father left everything in my name. He's already retired. He's protected. But I'm going to jail, Marina. Silence. I should have felt satisfaction. Should have felt that justice was being done. But all I felt was emptiness. What do you want me to do? I asked. You have the original logs, she said. You know when the accounts were created. You can prove it wasn't me. You're the only person who can. And there it was. Perfect irony. The person who had humiliated me, ridiculed me, tried to use me, was now begging me to save her. I sat in silence for a long time. Julia was in the next room, working on her own laptop. The girls from the mentorship program were going to meet me on the weekend. My life was finally in place. And Larissa? Larissa was losing everything. Not for something she did, but for something she let happen. For being too weak to question. For trusting the wrong people. I could let her fall. Could watch while everything crumbled. It would be easy. Justifiable even. But then I remembered something Julia had told me on that beach trip. People destroy what they don't understand. Larissa never understood me. But did I understand her? Did I ever try? She was raised in a world where appearances mattered more than character. Where fraud was creative accounting and manipulation was networking. She didn't choose that family any more than I did. The difference is that I found a way out. And she didn't. I'll think about it, I said finally. Marina, please. I hung up. That night, I told Julia everything. We sat on the balcony as always, with the city shining below us. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to let her suffer. Let her feel what I felt all those years. And the other part? I sighed. The other part knows she's a victim too. In her own way. Julia nodded. You don't have to choose between revenge and forgiveness. There's a third path. Which? Justice, she said. Real justice. Not just for you. For everyone. And that's when I understood what I needed to do. In the following days, I gathered everything. Not just the ghost account logs, but everything. All the evidence I had collected. The IP patterns showing they were created during times when Larissa was provably elsewhere. The email conversations between Ricardo and the ghost contractors. Everything. But I didn't send it to Larissa. I sent it straight to the company's internal audit, with a copy to the legal department. And along with it, I sent something else. All the history I had collected about Larissa. The lies, the manipulations, the small frauds. Not to condemn her, but for context. I wrote a letter explaining everything. How the family worked. How favoritism and lack of consequences created people who thought they were above the rules. How both father and daughter were guilty, but in different ways. Ricardo had committed deliberate fraud. Larissa had been complicit, even if unconsciously at first. Both needed to answer. But I also included a recommendation. That they take the circumstances into account. That family coercion and abuse of power be considered. That there was a difference between architect and pawn. I didn't do this for Larissa. I did it for real justice. 3 weeks later, the results started appearing. Ricardo was formally charged with corporate fraud and money laundering. The evidence was irrefutable. He tried to throw the blame on Larissa, but the timestamps and IP logs told another story. Larissa was called as a witness, not as a defendant. She would still face consequences, fines, community service, a permanent stain on her record. But not prison. And something else happened. Something I didn't expect. Olivia sued Larissa for identity fraud. With all the evidence I had helped compile, the case was quickly resolved. Larissa had to pay full restitution plus damages. Others started coming forward. The guy she had used as a fake reference. the company where she had lied about the offer letter. One by one, the bills came due. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. And through all of it, I didn't say a word. Didn't post on social media. Didn't send passive-aggressive messages. Just let the truth speak for itself. Christmas that year was different. Julia and I organized our own celebration. We invited the girls from the mentorship program and their families. My father showed up. For the first time in years, he actually showed up. We cooked together. We laughed together. There was even karaoke, courtesy of Isabella, who insisted. And when we sat down for dinner, without exaggerated decorations, without calligraphy place cards, without silent tension, I looked around the table and realized something. This was my family now. Not by blood, but by choice. The next day, I received a message from Larissa. I didn't read it for 2 days. When I finally opened it, it was short. Thank you for not letting me go to jail. I don't deserve your kindness. I'm doing therapy now, trying to understand who I am without their validation. I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to know. You were right. About everything. Sorry it took so long to see. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing to say. That apology wasn't for me. It was for herself. And maybe someday she would really change. Maybe she would find her own path like I found mine. But that was no longer my responsibility. In January, I was promoted to senior engineering manager. Julia and I started looking for a bigger house, one with an extra office for me to run the mentorship program that was growing faster than I could keep up with. Isabella graduated from high school with a full scholarship for computer science. She called me crying with happiness. You changed my life, she said. No, I replied. You changed yours. I just showed you that you could. And as for my biological family, Aunt Claudia sent me an invitation to next year's Christmas. A real invitation, handwritten, with an apology. I put it on the fridge. I still don't know if I'll go. But the difference now is that it's my choice. Not obligation. Not guilt. Not fear of being forgotten. Because I finally understood something fundamental. You can't control how people treat you. You can't force them to see you, value you, respect you. But you can control whether you keep showing up in spaces where you're diminished. You can control who you build your life with. You can control your own narrative. For years, I let my family's story define me. The weird cousin. The one who didn't fit. The footnote. But the truth is I was never a footnote. I was the chapter they didn't know how to read. And now I'm writing my own book. With my own characters. My own plot. And it's a much better story than anything they could have written for me. 6 months later, on a Saturday afternoon, I was at the cafe working on my laptop when someone approached my table. Larissa. She looked different. Thinner. Shorter hair. No heavy makeup. Simple clothes. But mainly, her eyes were different. Less empty. More present. Can I sit? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded to the empty chair. We sat in silence for a moment. I didn't come to ask for anything, she said finally. I just wanted you to know I'm working. Really this time. Administration at an NGO. Doesn't pay much, but it's honest. I nodded. And I'm paying back. Everyone I hurt. It'll take years, but I'm doing it. Good, I said sincerely. You didn't have to help me, she continued. You could have let me sink. Why didn't you? I thought for a long moment. Because revenge isn't justice. And because, in the end, I didn't want to become the type of person my family taught me to be. She nodded, her eyes watering. You were always better than all of us. No, I corrected. I just chose a different path. She stayed a few more minutes. We talked superficially about work, about life. It was strange, but not uncomfortable. When she got up to leave, she paused. I know we'll never be close. I know I ruined any chance of that. But thank you for showing me there's still time to change. After she left, Julia, who was sitting across the cafe giving me space, came to sit with me. Are you okay? She asked. I said. And I was. Because I realized something. The story was never about destroying Larissa. It was never about revenge or making someone pay. It was about freeing myself. From expectations. from the hierarchy, from the role they forced me to play. And in that process, maybe I helped another person free themselves too. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Larissa will really change, or if my family will understand what they did. I don't know if I'll ever have a true relationship with them. But I know this, I no longer need their approval. I no longer need their love. I no longer need a place at that table. Because I built my own table. And it's full of people who really see me. Who value me for what I am, not for what I should be. And at that table, I'm not a footnote. I'm not the weird cousin. I'm not the one who didn't succeed. I'm simply Marina. Engineer. Mentor. Girlfriend. Friend. And that's more than enough. It's everything. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming injustice. Your comments and support make all the difference for other people who may be going through similar situations. Until the next story.